Oh,
Who's recording? Someone is recording this.
Michiel is in the. Michiel is.
I'm back.
You're back.
I'm
back.
sorry. Yeah, I'm recording. So let me share.
Nou, ben niks van. Ik heb helemaal geen geluid meer over mijn koptelefoon.
Your mic's working though.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Die kant.
Ja, nou ja, lig aan mijn telefoon hoor.
Hè?
Lig aan mijn telefoon.
Okay. So please, everyone, we have a couple of new rules. We had them the last time as well. Please turn off your mic unless you're presenting. If you have questions, please use the chat. We will monitor that, and session will take about one hour. Today's presenters are Ralph and Doug. They will introduce themselves. We have a couple of sections in our session. So Ralph will start explaining about contacts in Salesforce Marketing Cloud from a contractual standpoint and prevention, how to prevent getting too many. Doug will talk us through several contact deletion approaches, and Ralph has a couple of specific use cases, and Doug will chip in on that. And after that, we will answer the questions you posted in your registration, and you can also post in the chat, and we will answer anything. So I think I have the power of the presentation. So are you ready, Ralph?
I'm ready. You decided speed.
Okay, excellent.
So let's start with the basics. Contacts are counted based on their contact key. The contacts are combined from all the sync data extension, which means your leads, your users, your person accounts, and your contacts, obviously, but also mobile contacts and your all subscriber list. I stole a graph off the Salesforce Marketing Cloud website. The moment you have a mobile contact or an email subscriber and they share one contact key, as far as Marketing Cloud is concerned, it's one person. So even if there are like 6 different data extensions, it doesn't matter. They still count as one person or one contact. Contacts in unsendable data extensions don't count. So you won't be paying for them, which makes sense because if you have a lot of data, you don't want to pay for the color of their car or whatever. Every contact in the all contact list in Content Builder or Contact Builder counts. Even if you've never sent them an email or never sent them a push notification or a text message. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. I'm not sure if it's in the next slide. It does. Can we go back one slide? You feel? Thank you. Contacts that are unsubscribed, bounced, held, you name it, they do count towards your maximum amount of contacts. As far as Salesforce is concerned, they are in Marketing Cloud, so you're paying for them. The logic behind that is that even if they are unsubscribed, they can resubscribe and become mailable again. And even if they're bounced or held, you can query them and get more information out of them. Now I'm ready for the next slide. Thank you. So prevention, which is always better than finding a cure afterwards. Prevention of receiving unexpected notification or info invoices from Salesforce due to exceeding license limitations, also to prevent data pollution in general. As Michiel mentioned, some of us got an email in the last few weeks from Salesforce like, hey, you've exceeded your account limits. They usually do this once per quarter. And in my experience, they don't start dropping invoices, but they do expect you to do something about it. You should always try to be ahead of it and make sure they don't send you those emails, because at least they told me that they are taking it in consideration when you have to renegotiate your contract. Since the contact volume is part of every Salesforce marketing license, take this topic seriously. An added benefit of keeping your database clean is the possibility of making mistakes in your campaigns also decreases, because you have less dirty data to worry about. It's cheaper because you're not sending emails to people that don't exist anymore, etc.
Wat zeg je? Ik zit nu gewoon lekker. Dat zeg je wel.
Onno, zou jij je microfoon
Ik zit ook lekker.
Sorry.
Next slide, please. So, how do you prevent it? Obviously, try to use one contact key. When you're importing data, try to import data only with a contact key. If you have a list of just email addresses you got somewhere, either import them directly into Salesforce Service Cloud and then get them through the sync. If you have a different CRM system, upload it to there. If you have neither, try to find a unique key somewhere. I would like to advise you to use the Salesforce contact key, contact ID or lead ID, because Marketing Cloud is built for that. Map all external integrations and data processes. Document them properly in an overview, just so that you know where your data is coming from, where it's going. Besides that, it's recommended practice under GDPR. It always helps when they come knocking down your door that you can show them where your data is coming from and where it's going. So that they don't have to look for that themselves. Plus, it helps you think about where your data is coming from. So when you do get duplicates, you know where they could be coming from. Build a set of matching and do duplication rules on one or multiple attributes if you consume data from multiple sources and don't already work with a CRM or CPD that already consolidates the data. Try to use the CRM system where possible. If you have Sales and Service Cloud, let Sales and Service Cloud do the deduplication, and let Marketing Cloud just leech off the data. It's easier, it's more visible for most people. And of course, add filters to your synchronized data extension so that you don't import everyone, because you'll be billed for everyone in Salesforce, which can be very expensive. If you expect to get 1 million contacts and Salesforce loads like 6 million, then it's going to be expensive. But a best practice for this is to create a lookup field with all your usual prerequisites, has an opt-in, is mailable. Anything else that you might have that's business specific that you don't want people to receive email, put that in a lookup field and filter based on that. So you will keep them from being loaded into Marketing Cloud. Last few best practices: only use load data into Marketing Cloud that you are going to use. Don't grab everything you can and sync it with Marketing Cloud just because you can. To be honest, I like to get as much data as I can so that I know what I can use, but if you're not going to use it, it's pretty sure it's not conform GDPR, but you're also at risk to load more data into Marketing Cloud than you're using. And if you just create a sendable data extension for data that's not sendable, you're creating a lot of extra records as well. Try not to abuse Marketing Cloud as a CRM system or CDP-like tool, because it's not. You can try to use it. It will work, but it's not user-friendly in that way.
So very much as Ralph said, right? Prevention is going to be always better than the cure. So I think, what we're trying to get you guys to think about here is really how to solve that problem at the beginning. I don't think anyone likes the idea of having to go through all this work and trying to then delete stuff and then clean it up afterwards. I have seen a lot of customers who go, yeah, we want to do this POC, so screw it, we'll just use email addresses for this POC. And then we end up with email addresses there 3 years later in the system. So that can be a challenge. And I know that that's the case. So really, if you guys are setting up your platforms, try and make sure they're clean and tidy from day one. We're going to look at a couple of examples of ways to deal with that if you're dealing with a system whereby you're going to have to delete the context. So maybe you've said at the beginning that you've got a bunch of data. You've now really put a more structured process in place. So now your lists are really only the contacts that you need, only the ones that you actually want to target through Marketing Cloud. So now you're left with maybe, let's say, 1 million contacts who you want to target, and you've actually got 6 million in the account. Well, how are you going to go and delete those, right? So maybe you've really put in a lot of effort, but you still need to clean those up because the account executive is still asking you those questions. So we're looking at some examples here where we're saying, look, we're not doing it manually because quite frankly, I've never seen a client which has a process in place where it manually actually works. Someone's always going to forget, and that's not really good enough from a GDPR perspective. So you need to make sure that when really things are deleted, that they are deleted. And putting in place automated processes is really essential for that. I'm also putting an assumption here that we're using Salesforce. Most customers that I work with from the Accenture side are indeed working with Salesforce as a backend to Marketing Cloud. And that could be just as purely a simple database, right? There's quite a few clients who say, yeah, we don't really need Salesforce yet. But a small Salesforce instance with a couple of users is not overly expensive. And it exactly helps with, like Ralph said, with a lot of those kind of deduplication problems, which Marketing Cloud doesn't have built in. I put a link here just for the trailhead on the delete. So when we send slides out, I guess, Michiel, that will be available. And let's get into a couple of examples. So if we skip over to the next slide. First one is really batch deletion. So this is what I would like to call one of those standard Marketing Cloud hacks. It's something that all of us do and all of us know. At least it's kind of standard amongst a lot of the discussions I've had. But everyone accepts it's not the right way to do it and there should be a better way. Until there is a better way, what we're really looking at here is saying, right, every day you get contacts from marketing from Salesforce, and some of them may have disappeared, right? Your filters now say that Fred is no longer being synchronized and no longer targeted because his account was deleted or he's a stale customer or archive customer. So we don't need to have Fred in the database anymore. Now, you could obviously go and do that manually, but as I mentioned, that's something you don't want to do. So we might have a process in place which really takes a list of all those contacts coming in on a synchronized data extension and create a data extension out of that. Okay? So we can actually do that by basically looking at the all subscriber list. And we can use a mobile list where we can say anyone that's attached to the data extension, which is coming in on the synchronized data extension, is okay. So we can say where is null, people that aren't on that synchronized data extension and data designer. Then what we can do is basically filter those ones out. Mobile lists should, in theory, work. I recommend, again, you try this link here, even if you don't have anything in Mobile Studio implemented. They should usually work, and there's a couple of things in there which are actually based on Contact Builder. So try it out and seriously just comment, come back to us if you have any further questions. But basically, you're going to.
Available now through tab.
Sorry?
I think they added a tab through Contact Builder as well, so you can go to it straight from Contact Builder.
I saw the lists that were there. I'm not sure if you can still access it if you don't have Mobile Studio, so I was a bit wary of recommending it, that's all. But yeah, generally your idea is to get this list. And the thing is that because Data Designer is based on your all contacts list, and you're basically saying, okay, exclude every person who's coming in on the synchronized data extension, your contact, you're going to be left with the stub of people who basically are no longer needed. So in this case, you're then going to say, excellent, well, we know there's this contact delete API. There's a good example here, which Lucas from Salesforce team has actually written on Stack Exchange. So for those of you that aren't super friendly with development, I recommend you have a look at that. It's a really simple copy-paste example. And you can use server-side JavaScript activity to basically trigger that every day. What you're then going to do is simply have an automation to refresh this mobile list. So every day you might say, okay, let's go and refresh it. Let's update the contacts. And then you're going to trigger off the server-side JavaScript to go and delete everything in that mobile list. Then the outcome is basically going to be that you're going to profit, right? You don't have to worry about all those problems that you're going to have from the account executives. So that should basically solve most of your circumstances. Okay, it's something that I do basically with every customer, and it's a very simple process. It uses automation. The only thing you need is exactly a copy-paste, more or less, script for server-side JavaScript, and everything else is configuring. So it's usually pretty easy for the functional team. And also probably in a lot of cases, more importantly, it's important to be able to demonstrate from a GDPR perspective that there's a process which runs every day and deletes X amount of contacts, and it works very simply. Can go to a second example, which is a one-off deletion. You can actually request an extract from all contacts based on the discussion we had yesterday. I wasn't aware that was the case. We had a quick chat yesterday in preparation, and you can actually extract a full extract of all contacts from support, and they will drop that into a data extension for you. So the benefit of that is that it's obviously just going to work one-off. You're not going to contact support every week to try and get that. But if you're really talking about limiting that from the 6 million down to the 1 million, and then after that you go, you know what, we're going to put in place the approach 3, which is what's coming up, then this might be actually just all you need. You might not need that automation. Good. And it's just going to be a deletion request from the UI. Okay, so that's just going to be simply select the list or select all contacts, and then basically go through and do a deletion on the entire data extension, which will then delete everyone that's part of that. The last one is really this kind of ongoing deletion. And this is something that is great practice to put in place, but we all understand that there's obviously challenges when it comes to working with APIs and having development capacity for something that's not really driving a functional value. At the end of the day, this is a compliance requirement, so no one really gets super excited when you mention it. What it does do, however, is means that we can then say as soon as a contact's deleted from Salesforce, we can actually use the integration using Apex through to Marketing Cloud to go and delete that contact by contact. So that's going to mean as soon as you delete the contact in Salesforce, you're able to then automatically have that removed, restricted in Marketing Cloud. Of course, it has some processing time, so you have to wait a couple of minutes usually for it to actually take effect. But it is something that's really tidy and it's really clean. And it means that you don't have to put in place all those automations to run every day to delete contacts. To do that, you're going to have some simple credential storage and named credentials in Salesforce, for those of you that are familiar with it. You're going to have a simple Apex trigger for after delete of a contact, and then you're going to run that queuable method to call the Marketing Cloud API. So for those of you that are developers, you'll understand that perfectly on the Salesforce platform. For those of you that are not, you can happily give this simple example through to them, and they should be able to help you out with that. Those are kind of the simple examples from contact deletion. If we just jump on to the next slide, there's a couple of other just points to remember around that, right? Once you've deleted a contact, this isn't like Salesforce where it's in the recycle bin. It's gone. All the data associated with it, gone. Bye-bye. It's not like a merge, so it's not the scenario where you can kind of merge these histories or anything. It's definitely not working. It's bye-bye. We actually can only run this at parent level. So I've had some customers ask me before, okay, we've got these different business units. I want to delete them from this part, but not from this part. It's really important to understand that all contacts actually is your whole account. So there's no way to delete parts in one business unit. It's really just at the top level. And because of that, what you're doing is really only at the top level. It's all or nothing. You can't say, yeah, delete all my contacts, but actually I want to keep all their tracking history. It doesn't work like that. It's all or nothing. You really have to delete everything from the system. And that's really around GDPR compliance, that if something's deleted, it's deleted. If it's non-sendable data extensions, as Rob mentioned, those are not going to be affected. And essentially the outcome of that is that you need to make sure that anything which is containing your customer data has, which is potentially being sent to, is listed as a sendable data extension. That's not always ideal, especially because it can slow down certainly the deletion process if you've got millions of data extensions set up that way. But it does mean that way, if there is a contact delete request, that those contacts are definitely going to be deleted from the data extensions. So a bit of a trade-off you need to work with there, but it's generally good practice. Your view as web page links will stop working. It seems obvious, but if a customer says we no longer want to deal with you, everything is going to be deleted from the system. Your view as web page links will stop working. So if they try and open an email and try and look at stuff through that link, it's not going to work. Simple thing, but sometimes it's a challenge. Those contact deletion requests are limited to 1 million. So we said we've got 6 going down to 1 million. That's probably going to have to take 5 different tries to actually get the full deletion requests through. That's relatively simple. You might want to create a data extension whereby you filter it based on some criteria, or you just create a data extension which you then cut up into 5 different pieces. SQL is very quick to do that. If you're interested, you can also query those mobile lists via SQL. If you want to give that a shot, that's also something that I found out earlier on in the week. So it's a good thing to be able to try out if you're interested. And also just for really the peace of mind for your marketing team, the aggregate metrics are going to stay the same. So when you go into those triggered sends or into those the send tracking, those are going to stay the same. It's really only the individual metrics which are being removed. So the relationship between those metrics and the person is disappearing. I think that's the last one from my side, and we're going through to a couple of use cases.
So I grabbed a couple of the questions that came from the app group and thought I'd highlight them in the slides. To start all over again, what are the things that you need to be aware of in your settings so Salesforce Marketing Cloud does not create duplicate contacts? The most important thing, be consistent with your contact key. If you are consistent with that and not use an email address as a contact key one time and a contact ID the second, you're good to go. It won't create duplicates. Next slide, please. What is a good data approach when you already have contacts in Salesforce Marketing Cloud from previous imports? And 620, you want to enable the Marketing Cloud Connect Sync feature to sync contacts from Sales and Service Cloud with a high possibility of duplicates. There are 2 options here. If you already use the contact ID, you're good to go. You're not going to have any problems. However, if all the imports were done on email address or whatever was available at that time, and you don't have any email addresses or you don't have any contact IDs or lead IDs in Salesforce Marketing Cloud, you're going to have a bad time. In that case, personally, I would make sure that all your contacts that are already in Marketing Cloud are being imported into Sales and Service Cloud. Export all the data that you need for posterity, you might want to export all the send log or any send information into a separate data extension with its primary key email address, then delete everything you have in Marketing Cloud. So you'll lose some data, but that's going to happen anyway if you're going to deduplicate them, because you can't really merge different fields. Then activate the sync and retrieve all the contacts that you've just deleted. And then through the contact builder, connect your old data extension with all the previous sends to the contact, so you can still see which emails they got way back, but you can't see the email reporting unless you've exported that and got it in a separate file somewhere. So that would be the way I would handle it.
Any comments from you, Doug, as well?
No, you could. I think some of those reporting questions are obviously always a challenge. One client I work with is also looking at similar scenarios where they're saying, yeah, they just want to send out the first email, but then after that it'll appear in Salesforce. It's like, guys, you have to go through Salesforce first to get the ID. Otherwise, that first email is not going to be tracked with everything else. So the question is then, well, how do we do that? So doing things like that and having that discussion is often a really big challenge to make sure they're, again, doing this prevention first so that we don't have to go and do the cleanup afterwards at all. And that really is something that's hard to get across a lot of the time when we're discussing. But it's really important to make sure that that discussion is happening so that you are really having tidy contact keys in the first place.
Even if they wanted to do it like that, I would recommend them to create a contact through Journey Builder and then send an email, or delete them. I mean, especially if you want to track it. How to identify an old contact in Salesforce Marketing Cloud instance without a connected Salesforce org, especially in a Salesforce Marketing Cloud instance which is sending high volumes of transactional email. I'm not completely sure who posted this question, but I had a similar problem a while back where a client of mine used a contact key that wasn't personal, but it was more, they didn't use Salesforce, Service Cloud, but they used could be compared to the account ID. So one account ID could have multiple people connected to it, which doesn't have to be a problem, but if you start using Mobile Connect, it is going to be a problem. Yeah, we basically did what we did with the last question. We deleted most of them. But because the keys were different, we could determine which ones weren't correct, so we could delete them. If it's the case and you're just using Marketing Cloud for triggered sends and want to delete them afterwards, I would just query them and use the Deletion API to delete them once a day or once a week, which works fine most of the time, except last Black Friday, where they just decided that it was too much of a hassle to keep it going, and it cost too much processing power, and they just stopped processing deletion requests. But usually that's the easiest way to go.
I think, yeah, here's as well, I think one of the challenges that some clients are facing around transactional stuff, right, is that you normally, if we're talking about Marketing Cloud, the main use case you're dealing with is customers who you know. So you might have multiple different messaging scenarios that you're dealing with, right? So it's not just transactional, but also potentially campaign mailing. And then maybe you really need that history that's there. When it comes to transactional, obviously, if you can imagine you're buying, let's imagine a house. You know, people don't buy houses every week. So if it's just a confirmation email to buy a house, I know it's an extreme example, But these are the kind of things that really you're going to have a huge volume of people for relative to the amount of communication you might want to send, right? There is, in theory, some limitations which are in your contract, which you just need to be aware of as well. And it's the reason why there's no Automation Studio activity for delete contacts which fit a certain criteria. And it's basically that Salesforce does not like the idea of you going through every day in your account and deleting every single person, right? And that could really be some kind of issue because essentially you'd be trying to reduce your license costs artificially by doing that. Of course, it's also not fair the other extreme where you have a huge amount of different people and actually you only ever send one message to them. That's also not what they're trying to stop. So you need to try and find that balance there and just make sure that for the customers that really are permanent customers that you're keeping, that you have those people still staying in the system. And for those which are really maybe just this one-off message and then forget, those are kind of the things which you can probably go through and delete on a weekly kind of basis, and you're probably safe. But if you've got any questions around that, it's definitely worthwhile quickly just mentioning to your account executives, having it in an email, and just making sure that they're okay with it, because I've had some interesting discussions previously.
Sure. Send a message in the chat that with the specific use case was that they could send emails to everyone in the Netherlands, but if they delete them, the problem would be that they will be stuck in the deletion process for, well, by default, 2 weeks. You could request a support ticket that decreases the deletion time to 0.
You can do it through the UI. On the UI, you can make that change.
Through the UI nowadays? Oh,
Yep.
Good.
If I can maybe comment on this, I already have the suppression period set to 0 because the suppression period itself is something different than the time it takes for a large batch of contacts to be deleted. So my suppression period is set to 0, but let's say I want to delete 1 million contacts. It will take, I don't know, maybe 24 hours or so before the whole deletion process is finished. And in those 24 hours, my contacts are frozen. But it could be that someone orders a new package or something and they need to have an order confirmation or something like that. So that's the thing I'm kind of struggling with.
There's two things that you can, well, one thing that you can do to speed that up is first of all really reduce the volume of sendable data extensions, right? The fewer the sendable data extensions there are, the quicker that will go through processing. So definitely that's advantageous. The other one is more, again, just kind of exactly what I was mentioning, right? So if it's the kind of thing which you're going to send one email and then screw it, it's never going to need to be talked with again, you're probably fine with it being deleted. But if it's really going to be the case that you're going to be likely messaging that person multiple times, let's say in a month potentially, I would argue that it would be better to just leave those contacts there in the first place. You mentioned packages, so certainly that is something that I can understand. I work with another client which does a similar thing in Germany. And in that case, they were perfectly okay with that, right? They talked with the customer, they talked with the Salesforce exec team. They understand really what the objectives are of the company. So if we're just using it for kind of this mass messaging tool, just for transactional messaging, having that conversation is worthwhile and explaining what's going on. So it's not always black and white, and often there's some flexibility in those licensing agreements. For example, they can sell you more contacts, but at a lower price to compensate for the fact that actually you're not really using all the contacts. Generally speaking, it's a challenge to deal with the large volumes, and the reason for that is that obviously it's going through all those data views, all those sendable data extensions, every table in the system, making sure it's cleaned up. So I can understand why it's there. Those are really the only advice that I can give you to have that discussion.
Okay.
And to clean up.
I mean, again, like you can clean up as much as you like, but exactly like you're mentioning, sure. I mean, if it takes a day to delete 1 million contacts, then it takes a day. That's going to block them for that period, and there's nothing you can really do about that in between. But it's based on the assumption that that contact is no longer required in Marketing Cloud. And if we're saying that that contact may be contacted again, one could make an argument that it is still required in Marketing Cloud, so shouldn't be deleted.
Yep.
So it's kind of the wording thing. I do think it's also important just to note, I worked with one client previously, which was working on Community Cloud. So they had just under 1 million Community Cloud users. And because users, leads, and contacts all count towards that contact limit, it really is something that you can discuss with your account team. I mean, in our case, we're syncing across certain data from the user object, things like the last login date and stuff like this, which is really useful to have on the record. But we didn't want to put in place a whole bunch of logic to copy those fields across to the contact. So we spoke with them and said, look, I'm sorry, but we're never sending to the user IDs. These user IDs are just here for because of the synchronized data extension, but we need the data on that. And then that discussion went down the path of saying, fine, whatever their count is for contacts, we're happy to exclude that same amount of users. But again, that is really something that's an account team discussion that you need to have with them directly.
Cool, thanks.
There were some more questions. Please, if other people who are watching have questions, post them in the chat. We received one question on what the best way is to count contacts through the API or queries. What would you do if you were to do this in an automated way?
Depending on where you want to see it.
We're talking about API connections, right? So in this case, unfortunately, there's no easy API to tell you the context. I'm just going to check one thing here because I think there might be certain pieces of data which I can't actually access. But generally, the approach of using a mobile list might be a good option for you. So you could use a mobile list, which is really simple with kind of a dummy filter where contact equals star, and you know that all those contacts never equal star. That will give you all your contacts. You can put it into a mobile view. As I mentioned, you can query those, so you could just do an aggregate on that data extension and then make it accessible via API like you would any other data extension. It wouldn't be always accurate, but I mean, I don't think anyone here requires a minute current count of how many contacts are in the system. So that could be a workaround. I'm just checking if the other ones are here, so that's good. Then I'll hand off to Rolf.
Depending on if you want to see it on a minute-to-minute basis, or if you just want to keep track of it, there's a report called a contact count, which you can get sent to you every day, but I think it only refreshes once every few days. And it tells you how many contacts you have and how many contacts you have per studio or per builder. So I'm pretty sure Salesforce account team uses the same report based on delays in their information.
Well, I think the account team, because we spoke to them the other day, and they couldn't tell us where to get the contact count, which was very easy to get. And my belief was
contact builder works as well.
Yeah, I don't know who told me about it, but they get, I think, some extracts directly into their own Salesforce account with just a task to call us. So I'm just
gonna really dumbly share my screen here because I think that some people exactly haven't ever seen this, account executives included. This was a report which was created about a year ago and is available. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you go find it. It's under reports, what's here, and then you could just go to catalog, called contacts count. It shows you the amount of contacts in the system over a certain period. And what you can see is various different types of contacts which have been added. So this is just one of our Accenture test instances here. So you can see, for example, distinct contact count. This number here, I'm going to take a stab, is different than the number that I have in all contacts. If I come in here, which is 14,600, and in here 14,000, 653. So that can certainly be a different factor. This is to just present where those contacts are coming from. So we can see distinct email addresses, push contacts, populations. Don't use populations anymore, guys. If you don't use populations. Contacts from triggered sends. So those are those kind of triggered send ones where you never added them from Sales Cloud. And what I think is interesting is really this contacts and leads ones. So actually, from my understanding, and again, this is a matter of Salesforce doesn't really provide much information on exactly how it's counted. But basically, if you have a lot of leads and they're converted to contacts, this overlapping one where they're both available actually won't be counted. So this will actually reduce your contact count, even though in all contacts, it will show up as how many contacts are there. So don't treat all contacts as exactly the same as your contact count, but it should give you a rough idea about what's available. And you can always come into this report here to kind of get a bit of an understanding about how that's being calculated. I don't think it's perfect, but it does give you some kind of idea about it, which I think is at least helpful.
Okay, thanks. Anthony, you have a question. Maybe you care to elaborate a little bit. It's about the contacts count report being accurate.
Right. Hey, hey everyone. Can you hear me? Wait, I can actually even flip on my camera.
Yeah.
All right. Hey. Well, so we noticed this with clients of ours that you know, because with Deselect we actually also look at the contacts count as a pricing variable, so it's very important to us. But we did notice with some clients that there's a significant discrepancy between the report and all contacts. So maybe it was a coincidence that this customer just deleted or uploaded, let's say, 500,000 contacts. It's possible, but could there be any other reason than that? For instance, that report, does that reflect all BUs? Because that's my current assumption.
This should reflect all BUs, yeah. So
Yeah.
again, contact
Depending on...
count is entire instance, right?
Yeah, so it's also what we thought. So yeah, we saw larger discrepancies. I'm looking across the table because they're the person who who experienced that. So it's interesting. And Doug, would you happen to know if this report can actually be called by API?
No.
No, yeah, that's why.
FTP you can drop it onto, which depending on how you want to define an API, could be argued to be kind of an API. But yeah, you could drop it onto there. To drop it onto an FTP email schedule would be one way to do it. But it's pretty limited, yeah, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, and lastly, I put it in the chat too, but I don't think AEs are even supposed to have access to your marketing cloud account. So even if they could or knew how to navigate to all accounts or the reports, they couldn't check it. Yeah. I've also heard this rumor that, or in talking with people a bit closer towards the product team, that there are some kind of internal reports available, but I think it's
yeah, so contact count and also super messages, both of those are available to the Salesforce internal team on the what's called org62. So they do get some kind of metrics reported there, and they are working towards having Datarama have additional access to that data so that when you buy Datarama, you can also see your contact count. My personal opinion is obviously that that's quite disturbing, that you need to buy another tool to understand how the first tool is working, but that's a separate discussion. I mean, I think this aspect of discrepancies, look, the reality is that no one can tell me very clearly how to read this and how this relates to the exact contact count, because I've seen that this report here doesn't always match all contacts. Even right here, you can see there's a slight difference. It's not major in this case. It's 7 contacts different. But it is a difference, right? And so the question is, how come there's 7 when you look at this list here, nothing here says 7, right? So someone is clearly, this is clearly a calculation which is not clearly defined. And I think that's part of the reason why they're very reluctant to provide documentation as to how that works, because it is something that is not exactly defined. The idea is that these kind of reports give you a rough idea. And so a lot of the time, if you kind of show them something like this and say, but this says this, then that kind of helps you with your discussions with them and say, well, this says, 10,000. Why do you have 6 million? That's ridiculous. Like, explain to me what's going on there, because that kind of puts the pressure back on them, given that this is the thing that says contacts count, right? So I think that's part of the discussion. Unfortunately, it is something you need to do directly with them to really fine tune those. But yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah. Like I say, some of these things will be slightly different just because of this overlap in context. There's some other things around there which we discussed yesterday, which is called alternate key store, which is essentially a Pandora's box of black magic, which no one really understands. If you hear them say alternate key store, assume that whatever they're talking about is not clear and is not completely understood, because I don't understand, and neither do any of the people that I work with from the Salesforce side exactly how that works.
It's the first time I hear that. In what context does that phrase surface?
This particular one here is usually what it relates to.
Interesting.
That's a new session, I think.
Completely different session, way into the weeds.
Michiel, maybe you can organize an SFMC Black Magic session.
That would be a good one, I think. Yeah.
We might have to kidnap Mark Benioff for that.
He can explain himself, I think.
Let's hope so.
Now we have 22 people in the session. That's worth his time, I think. So, yeah.
It's not about the amount of people, but the people that are there.
Yes, of course. That's the big thing. Are there more questions? That's I think easy. But please open your mic if you have trouble typing with 2 fingers. I don't know how many people still do that, but even my kids, they.
I think maybe also just in the meantime, one of those discussions I've had also with a few people, multiple people on the call as well. It's also important looking at the synchronized data extensions. So looking at how you can really restrict the data that's going into those. The filters are there. It can use a Boolean, as Rolf mentioned at the beginning. So as long as it's a true-false value, you can use that as a filter. The problem is that it doesn't work with functions or formulas. So if you want to do that, you need to build a workflow or something else to populate that field every time, which can put some restrictions. Or if you're really lazy, you can always just use the email address. So say if the contact doesn't have an email address, don't import. Of course, that can have other impacts. When you're dealing with cross-channel, there's a lot of other things there. And maybe one other smaller thing that I noticed here, which could be interesting, is really looking at the push ones. So for those of you that have push mobile, I think that's a minority of people, but you'll notice that it will auto-generate a contact key. So sometimes we have customers which have a mobile app, which is very popular. Maybe they downloaded the app and the contact keys were created, but there was some issue with reassigning it to the actual contact key. And then you'll see on this report some contacts here which show up as mobile push contacts. More contacts will at least show up here when you're calculating that. So just as a side note, that could also be part of the reason why these get created, or inbound messages and those kind of things can also automatically generate. In the case of inbound message, they use contact key as the mobile number for an inbound message.
Yeah, maybe one addition to that. I don't think we mentioned that. There is also a way to create a tracking extract of all the contacts that do not have a channel assigned. And usually those are also contacts that that you don't want to have counted. And if you do that, that's also a useful. So sometimes if you, for example, do things in a journey and you use accounts instead of contacts, and because it's in a journey, it creates a contact for that account with an ID of that account ID, and that's usually not a good thing. That's
you should have in this list here of data extract activities. You should have this guy here, contacts without channel addresses. The data extract.
Yeah, that's a real lifesaver. I used to have to do it through the Mobile Studio. This is a lot easier. But I've got a client that has a mobile app that creates about 20,000 channelless records every day. So I'm removing those daily. automate it, of course. I'm way too lazy to do it by hand.
Of course you do, Ralph. Okay. Hey, if I see there's questions on sharing the recording of the session, we will do that probably tomorrow. It also always needs some processing time. The last time it was very fast, so maybe this evening. To close off, first of all, thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Doug, for sharing your knowledge. We also the bottle of wine is the virtual bottle of wine. I'm sending it now. There's also two announcements on from Sergey and Viresh. Who wants to go first? I think that's a bit of a surprise for them. Okay. I go? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so from Swiss Sense, we have two opportunities available. One for a Salesforce admin, can be junior or meteor. Starting if you're feeling like jumping on a rocket ship, just reach out to me. And we also have...
Not jumping on the bed?
Jumping on the bed, let's go. And we also have an opportunity for a database marketeer. So yeah, if you want to know more about Swiss Sense, what they're doing, they're actually going through a really cool implementation right now. So yeah, if you're interested, just reach out to me and I can connect you.
Okay, nice. Thank you. I will. I've put the links in the presentation, so that's for people interested. You can click in there. And Sergey, are you online? I don't think.
I don't see him on the list.
No. Oh, okay. He also had a vacancy. I don't have the link yet, but I'll put it in. So all that concludes things. You can subscribe to our WhatsApp group for our regular daily discussions, ranging from vacancies, coffee talk, and actual Salesforce Marketing Cloud questions. And we have a little less active LinkedIn group, but that's all going to change. Next topic of next meetup, post the topics in the chat, and we also received some topics during the registrations. Thank you for that. So we'll make sure to include that in the next sessions. So thank you all for joining. I will leave the channel open, so everyone who wants to have a little chat, please do so. And for the rest, enjoy your evening. And thanks, Ralph and Doug.
Pleasure.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Bye. Thanks a lot.
Bye bye.